So I don't get personally discouraged when I don't see the numbers of people that should be here. Because I think, you guys are going to hear, you're going to get the blessing. The other people aren't. So they're the losers. You know, we're not the losers, they are. And so, I mean, I took one geology class in college, and I remembered enough to get me through the class. But since then, getting acquainted with creation ministries and different geologists and things like this, it's like, oh, this is really fun. And you don't need a microscope, and you don't need a telescope. You can just go out and do all kinds of things, and you can learn about it, and there's, you know, whatever. So I tried to make my email sound appealing. Okay, I think we just have to turn the power back on then. Oh, is that the one? Oh, power. Okay, there. Yeah, on, off. Is it still? Okay, there it is. You got a solid green light. So anyway, we're going to be thankful that we're here, and we're going to be just a little bit saddened by the people that aren't. And we're going to continue on, and we're going to do this. All right, see, they have color. All right, and the keystone should recreate. Oh, it might not. We might have to go back and fix the little beveling thing. All right, so that being said, I don't need to pass around the clipboard because everybody's on the email list. And so I will inform the pastor when we're going to invade his church again next month. October 25th. There's color. I see the red up on top. So now launch your F5 and see what happens, or your... And then it bleaches. No, it's just kind of, I think it's just kind of bleached out. It might just, well, as we go through, we'll look and see. But all right, Tuesday, October 25th. That's like 4 weeks from today. Location, 303 West Main Street, wherever that is. Aliens, UFOs, and the Bible. UFOs. This powerful presentation will examine such topics as why the search for extraterrestrial life, why spend money, because that's what the government does best, or worst, whatever. Creation and time, what people are believing, NASA and Hollywood, Area 51, aliens or secret aircraft, science and logic, the Bible, creation and salvation, the great deceiver, and it's going to end with 4 conclusions. And this is Mike Riddle. We've had him here in the past before, and he's a powerful speaker. And so, and he is, with Master of Education from Pepperdine, President of Creation Training Institute Initiative, and adjunct staff with Answers in Genesis. So that's that. Pastor, I will leave these flyers up here on your pulpit. And we'll take this one down. And we'll pass this around during the question and answer session. Hopefully we won't have too many questions, keep us here too late tonight. So. But if we go through a few slides, then I think there might be something, then maybe we can look at, maybe there's a color balance thing, but I'm thinking it's probably a cable connection or something. So, no, I see pinkish. So it's just not as dramatically pinkish as, yeah, it's like it's being bleached out or something. Oh. Oh, nope, we don't. So, okay, I think, I'll tell you what, I'm going to set the microphone down. We've got that part done. But, Anthony, could we have you say the blessing?
Sure. Father, we thank you so much for your mercy and grace. The Lord God, and all the busyness of the week and life in general and the division in the country, we thank God for your creation. Lord, we love you for that. And, Father, I pray that you bless the evening and the speaker. Lord, if we could love you just a little bit more before this evening is over, we know that the speaker is led by your Spirit, Father. Father, you're good to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, let me just quickly check one thing here on this. Menu. Okay, no, menu. I have to hit the enter button, which I think is this one here. Okay, contrast is 50. Brightness is kind of high. That might be, it might be the brightness is bleaching out the colors. So let's just run this down a little bit and see if that doesn't bring out a little more color. It's going to be a little bit less bright, but it should be. Oh, cut that out. Okay, menu. I'm trying to get this to back out. All right. Oh, there we go. And then all right, now go. We'll see if we got, I lowered the brightness, which should lessen the bleachiness of the colors. I can see green up there. So. All right.
Right about the best we're gonna get.
All right. That's the best balance between color and.
Okay, so you go sit down there. I was gonna sit there so I can see it a little better.
You can have some light too.
No, you're okay.
Okay.
So I'm all set to go?
Yeah,
We said the blessing, we said the thing, and then we're gonna do the box, the offering during Q&A, so yeah. Oh! Is that what I forgot?
Yeah.
Let me introduce the Keystone projector here. This was a piece of hardware that's been around for a while, and it's, oh, we're talking about this guy. Well, he's an old piece of hardware too, but he's doing really good, you know, getting everything else considered. I like his t-shirt. Jim Clark, Arizona resident geologist, and we first met in the parking lot of the Palmcroft Baptist Church years ago before you started speaking here, and we were kind of like two ships in the night when we didn't meet each other on the Alaska Genesis cruise back in 2007. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Anthony, thanks for hosting us tonight. Appreciate it, and I'm glad I could come up. And this is, you know, a really good talk, and it's a really interesting talk. So, you know, a lot of people are going to miss out on it. So, but tonight I'm going to talk about a rock layer here in Arizona that I've really become interested in. It's created a lot of questions for me. And you know, I'm really interested. How did this rock layer form? How does it fit into the biblical flood record? And as I said, it's a very, very interesting formation. And the name of the formation is the Chimney Formation. Oh, and I'm the resident geologist of the Arizona Origin Science Association. Got a bachelor's degree in geology from Northern Arizona University and a master's degree in geological engineering from ASU. So, as I said, I've been looking at this rock formation for years, and you know, there's the secular worldview and there's the biblical worldview, and I'm going to contrast the two. So. This is the brochure you get at Petrified Forest National Park when you come into the park. And this is indoctrination.
Yes.
Okay? This is telling you that this formation was formed millions of years ago, about 200 million years ago. And you know, it just, you know, it's full of man's ideas and speculation and everything. They weren't there when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Another book. This is the truth. Okay, this is a very good book. It's called Carved in Stone, and I'm just promoting it. It's very good. It's by Tim Clary, Dr. Tim Clary, with the Institute for Creation Research. This is probably the best explanation for the deposition of rocks during the flood. Now, they've been playing around with how the rocks were deposited for several years, and they've always tied it into what we call the geologic column, and tied it into the various ages of the geologic column. Mm-hmm. Well, what Tim Clary did is he's gone out and studied multiple cores from oil wells all over the world. And they put it into a database, and they've figured out what's known as mega sequences. And I'm going to talk about mega sequences in my talk tonight. But throughout time, there were these sequences of deposition that coincided with either rising or falling water levels. And so, as I said, this is the best explanation that I've seen so far for the deposition of rocks. Once you figure out how the rocks were deposited, then everything else falls into place, such as how the fossils were formed and how things like the Grand Canyon were carved. So I highly recommend you get this book. It's not difficult reading, but I would recommend it for, you know, a high school earth science or geology class that's you know, where you're teaching creation science. It could even be used in college, my opinion. So it's a very, very good book, and I highly recommend that you get it. So, the Chimney Formation. As I said, my biggest question is, how did it form? How does it fit into the flood model? I'm going to talk about that tonight. The Chimney Formation is a very recognizable formation. It's only a few short miles from here in Payson. You start encountering it up near Holbrook. If you go up to Sholo and head east to Springerville, you get into the Chimney Formation, and it's these badland type deposits, and they're very, very colorful. And because of the colors, this whole area is known as the Painted Desert. That's where it's most visible, and it's a fairly, you know, sizable area. It's about 120 miles long by 60 miles wide, and it covers a good chunk of Arizona, and it all encompasses all of Petrified Forest National Park. And that Petrified Forest National Park is probably one of the best places to view the Chimney Formation. So I've taken a lot of photos from Petrified Forest National Park. So these are some of the pictures, and you just look at how colorful this formation is. It's made up of reds, grays, purples, yellows, you know, shades of blue. That's why they call it the Painted Desert. It's all these different colors, and they're because of the different minerals in the formation. Now, the secular scientists are going to say this formation was deposited over a few million years, very slowly, and, you know, actually they believe there were multiple floods during this time period. But yet, you know, you look at this formation, it looks like volcanic ash. All right? So, if this was deposited very rapidly by a volcanic eruption, as we're going to talk about tonight, boy, that really causes problems for the secular model of millions of years and slow processes. It's called the Theory of Uniformitarianism. So I've got all of these, you know, beautiful pictures of the Chimney Formation in these red colors, which are primarily iron. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't understand if, so they're saying that, because I've seen it's like the colors are like in layers,
Yes.
right? So they're saying that for however many millions of years, just that one kind of mineral with that one color was being deposited.
Yeah.
And then another layer of another mineral. How could that be?
Yeah. It doesn't.
How can one mineral be depositing for millions of years?
Absolutely.
Makes no sense.
The evidence doesn't fit their model, and I'll talk about that.
Okay,
All right.
I'm listening.
Okay, so you know you can see this just beautiful formation, and it's all throughout the national park, and it's all throughout the whole area. You head up toward north of Cameron, Arizona, heading up on US 89. You know, these just beautiful piles of these colorful rocks, and once again, looks like volcanic ash. Okay, that's a potential explanation for it. So these are all from the viewpoints in Petrified Forest National Park, and as you can see, it's deposited in layers. and the different layers in different colors.
Oh, yeah.
This is a place called Teepees. Okay, a lot of you recognize that. It's on the main road there. And we're going to talk about the Teepees area, but you can see the different layers, the different colors, which indicates that there's been differential deposition of these minerals, and they're laid down in layers, which is what we typically see. If you take a bunch of sediment, shake it up in a column of water, let it sit, it's going to settle out based on minerals and density of those minerals, and it's going to form layers. And that's what we see. We see these layered sediments throughout the whole Chimney Formation. And you know, these rocks easily erode. So you get these rills and everything in there, and these gullies, and it exposes petrified wood. Okay, that's you know, the Chimney Formation is the host rock for some of the largest petrified forest deposits in the world. This is looking at the Blue Mesa area. It's been in the news in the last week because a ranger's truck was shot at in the Blue Mesa area last week, and they actually caught the guy that did it.
Good.
So, but yeah, that's the Blue Mesa area, which is a very high. It's got a lot of beautiful petrified wood there. Another picture of the Blue Mesa, and there's a beautiful little trail down there at the bottom you can hike. It's not a super difficult trail. There is some steepness, but you know, you don't want to do it in the summertime, but the spring and fall, it's a beautiful time of year to hike that trail. This was my opening slide, and up there on top of that hill there is a fairly large log of petrified wood. And you can see also the petrified wood lying down at the bottom. As this petrified wood is exposed by erosion, it's got a lot of cracks in it, so it's going to break off and it's going to fall to the bottom as debris. But this is some very, very beautiful rock.
Yeah, excuse me. You said fairly large. All right. That looks like one humming big chunk of it.
That log is probably about, from the distance I took it, is probably about maybe 15 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's a lot of intact logs within the Chimney Formation. And the one thing, petrified wood's just not found at Petrified Forest National Park. It's found throughout the Chimney Formation everywhere. Up at Lee's Ferry, up at the up near the Grand Canyon, the Chimney Formation outcrops there, and right across the river, the Colorado River, from the boat launch, there's a hill back there, and it's the Shinnerup member of the Chimney Formation. And right on that hill, right next to the old trackways that were used by the wagons that utilized the ferry there, there's about, how long would you say that tree is? About 25 to 30 feet long. There's a log lying right there. And you find this petrified wood all over the place in the Chimney Formation. So, these are some Chimney Formation quick facts. Okay? Some things you may not know about the Chimney Formation. Well, it's found in Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas.
Kansas?
Yeah, it goes all the way up into Kansas. And it covers a fairly large area, and these are where outcrops of the Chimney Formation have been found. And this map, the blue area there, shows the extent of the Chimney Formation. And it actually extends out of Colorado and into Kansas there, and then across the panhandle of Oklahoma. So fairly extensive. It's a very large formation. One thing, the secular scientists can't explain extensive deposits of sedimentary rock. They always believe that it's just localized. But We find, you know, sedimentary rocks all over the world. In fact, they're over a mile thick. So, the Chimney Formation is about 800 to 1,500 feet thick. Okay? That's not an insignificant rock layer.
Understated.
Yeah, understated. That's a fairly thick rock layer. You know, you look at the Grand Canyon, the sedimentary rocks in there are, you know, are about a little over 3,000 feet thick. All right? So the Chimney Formation probably makes up anywhere from a third to half the thickness of what we find in the Grand Canyon. And this diagram here shows what's known as the Grand Staircase, and about 3 miles of sedimentary rock, close to 17,000 feet of sedimentary rock occurs on the Colorado Plateau. And I'll show you where the,
Before you leave that, could I ask a question?
I'm not leaving it right now, but.
Oh, okay. How was that determined? Was it through core samples or what?
A lot of this has been determined through core samples, and, you know, but in a lot of places I'm going to show you later, a lot of these rocks were never deposited. Okay? But it's assumed that these rocks kind of bend underneath, and then there's these additional layers that are built upon it.
Okay.
And so, where I've got the red dot there,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that is the Chimney Formation. So you can see that it is one of the thickest units on the Colorado Plateau. And it actually is visible right along what's known as the Vermilion Cliffs, which are right along here. So it comes out there, and then it's visible in several places along on the Colorado Plateau in the area of the Painted Desert. So we can take a look at it, and this is a little bit more, and once again, the Chimney Formation is right here. Okay, some more quick facts. It was named for the Chimney Valley in Apache County, Arizona by Herbert Gregory in 1917. Guess what? It's Arizona's rock. Okay, the type section where it's found is located in Arizona. Oh, I've got sweat in my eyes. Sorry about that.
Should be some Kleenex around here somewhere. This is a church.
I got it wiped out, but no problem.
You want me to turn the AC back on?
Yeah.
Looking for tissue frame.
Oh,
The speaker said yes.
yeah, turn on the AC. Okay, thank you. Okay. You know what? A lot of people don't realize the Chimney Formation is a source of uranium ore.
Good.
Okay. It's been mined extensively in Arizona because of its rock type. It's got a lot of minerals in it that have uranium. And it was mined extensively, primarily in the Tuba City area and in Cameron, and also further up in the Navajo reservation in that area because of its concentration of uranium. There's a similar formation, we'll talk about it a little bit later, the Morrison Formation, which looks almost identical to the Chimney Formation further up in the geologic layers, and it also has a lot of uranium in it. It's been mined extensively and used in the nuclear industry, used to make bombs, and those types of things. But yeah, it's a significant source of uranium ore. And it weathers, breaks down to a high clay content soil called expandable or compactable clay. Okay, this material contains a lot of the mineral feldspar. Okay, and feldspar is an alumosilicate. And when it breaks down chemically and physically, it will break down into clay minerals. And these clay minerals can swell when they get wet. So they expand. They're called fat clays, bentonitic clays, montmorillonitic clays. So when water gets in there, it's just pulled in like a sponge. And it's because of the electrical properties of the clay. So it will pull it right in, it will swell up. And then what happens, you know, and if you've got a roadway, thank you, I appreciate that.
Yes.
When you're driving down some of the highways in that area, particularly US 89 and I-40 in the area between Holbrook and Winslow, the road tends to get very, very bumpy. So what happens is you've got rain, the road's crowned for drainage, the rain goes off to the side, collects in drainage ditches on the side of the road, infiltrates into the soil, gets sucked up by the Chimney Formation, and then you've got this big 18-wheel semi-truck coming over there that's fully loaded, and when it goes over that area, guess what happens? It squeezes the water out. And so the clay compacts. And you've got this up, down, up, down, up, down. And the road becomes washboarded. Okay? And it becomes very, very bumpy. One thing that they've tried to do to remediate this, number one, you can add lime to the soil. It changes the electrical properties of the clay, makes it more permeable, okay, so that the water doesn't stay there, it flows through it, okay, so you don't have this swell compaction type effort. You can apply electrical current to the soil. They've tried that, but whatever you try to do, it's very, very expensive. So ADOT's been working on it. They've been working on it with a lot of universities. They put a lot of research and effort into it. Once again, it contains one of the largest deposits of petrified wood in the world. It's phenomenal how much petrified wood is here. Why does it have so much petrified wood? We'll talk about that a little bit later. You know, but some of the other areas you find a lot of petrified wood up at Yellowstone National Park, up on Specimen Ridge, and in other places like that. That's volcanic material. Maybe this is volcanic in origin. So these are some pictures of some of the beautiful petrified wood that you find at Petrified Forest National Park. This is in the I think it's called the Crystal Forest area. Yeah, the Crystal Forest area where the visitor center is. And just some beautiful examples of petrified wood. And I've got some here. You can go ahead and pass this around. I got this legally. I bought it at stores up there.
I figured you did.
Yep. So, and I'll show you later that the different colors mean a lot, and the type of minerals that are stored in these things. But if you take a piece of wood that hasn't been mineralized, it's very, very light. You take it when it's been petrified like this, it's very heavy because of the minerals that have filled in all the pore spaces of the wood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead and pass that around.
Will do.
This is one of the largest logs that I believe is in the park, and it's probably about almost 50 feet long, and it's almost an intact log, and it still has the root ball at the bottom of it.
Is that the one on your shirt?
Yes, I believe that's the one on my shirt.
It is.
And that's a picture of it, and you can see the root ball on the end. So, you know, and it's got some fractures in it, but it's still largely intact, and no one's stolen it. Okay? you know, believe it or not, this formation contains dinosaur fossils. It's the first formation on the Colorado Plateau where actual dinosaur fossils are found. Well, these are some of the fossils, and this is actually a Dilophosaurus fossil. How many of you saw the movie Jurassic Park? The Dilophosaurus was the spitting dinosaur
Oh, yeah.
that took out the character that played Newman in Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Okay, and so several of these Dilophosauruses have been found in this formation. This is either right on top of the Chimney Formation or it's within the formation right above it. You can see this on the road to Tuba City, heading east from US 89. It's about, about 5 miles, no more than 5 miles from US 89. And there's a big sign there. It says, dinosaur tracks, don't miss them. Don't miss them, okay? Pull in there and take a look at it. There's a Navajo guide there, paying $5. With inflation, it's probably gone up a little bit. But you can pay them, and they'll take you around to all these dinosaur tracks, these dinosaur fossils. There's actually dinosaur eggs there, fossilized dinosaur eggs. There's fossilized dinosaur poo-poo called coprolites lying around on the ground. And it's really, really an interesting place. So if you ever get a chance, stop in there, take a look, have the guide show you around. There's an actual fossilized tail. And one interesting thing you find out here is there are places where there are possible footprints, human footprints, on top of dinosaur tracks. Okay, they don't like to show it to you, but if you ask them to show you where they are, they will take you to them and they will show you it. And there's several places up here in this area where there are human footprints, apparent human footprints in dinosaur tracks, showing that dinosaurs and man were around at the same time. Boy, doesn't that throw a wrench into evolutionary theory? Because they say dinosaurs were around millions of years before man even came into being.
There's some strange sort of print at the very bottom down there. Going laterally across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw it.
Okay, so let's look at petrified wood again. All right, this is you know, one of the most extensive deposits of petrified wood in the world, and you know, you've got all these different colors, and you know, just beautiful type colors. Yellow could be iron. Yellow is also associated with uranium. Okay, it's called yellow cake, carnotite. And, you know, if you were to take, unfortunately I passed it all around, if you were to take a Geiger counter over this petrified wood, it would probably register. Okay? A lot of these fossils that are found in the Chimney Formation and the Morrison Formation. Okay, the Morrison Formation contains mainly dinosaur fossils. A lot of those dinosaur fossils are radioactive. All right, so there is radioactivity in these things, but green is from copper, chromium, and iron. They find greens in there. Tan is iron. Pink is iron. Purple is iron and also manganese. Black carbon color is from manganese. So you find all of these minerals. White is natural quartz. One red iron is ferric iron. So you find all of these just beautiful colors, and they're the different types of minerals that have been deposited into this petrified wood. Comes directly out of the rock formation. Okay, so it leaches in, it replaces the wood, and then causes it to be petrified. How fast does it happen? Well, according to the secular geologist, it takes millions of years. But petrification like this can take place in a matter of weeks. Been demonstrated. So, you know, you've got hot water with a lot of minerals in it, it's going to happen very, very quickly. These are some of the Chimney Formation fish fossils. There's a lot of fish fossils, particularly up in the top section of the Chimney Formation, which tells us that this formation was underwater. It was marine. I want to point out this guy here. You recognize that name?
Yeah.
Coelacanth. Okay, this has been found extensively in the Chimney Formation. In fact, it's got its own name, Coelacanth chinlea sorensensi. Okay. Hey, haven't we recently seen living coelacanths in Africa? And you know, and they look identical to coelacanths in the past. In fact, a lot of these fish that I've got shown here, they're still present today. They haven't changed in the fossil record, even though this was deposited over 200 million years ago, according to secular geologists. You know, if there was evolution occurring, wouldn't you think these fish would change? No, they haven't changed. You know, the fact that we see these fossils show that it's probably very recent deposition. I forgot to turn on my speaker. There we go. Can you hear me?
Oh,
All right.
now you got that nice deep.
Now I don't have to yell. Okay, I forgot to do that. Sorry about that. These are some other Chimney Formation fossils, and you find these crocodilian type creatures. The very interesting thing about a lot of these reptile fossils, or maybe dinosaur fossils, they haven't found anything that's intact. You go to the visitor center, they got these beautiful intact fossils, okay, that they claim are some sort of dinosaur. They even got something there that they claim is a dinosaur mammal kind of hybrid, okay? And they got another one that's a dinosaur bird hybrid. And they make these up, okay? They've only got very few fragments of these creatures. A lot of them, it's only a little bit of a tooth. They do have some intact skulls of some of these crocodilians, but not much else left. And then they construct these beautiful skeletons, and you know, but yet they're made up. Okay, they don't know exactly how these things looked. So very, very interesting. No, we find intact fossils of fish, small. We don't find a lot of intact fossils of dinosaurs in this layer. You go up to the Morrison Formation, which has some of the most extensive dinosaur fossil beds in the world. Still, there aren't usually complete intact skeletons, okay, bones. There's pieces, they're all broken up. So it tells you that something catastrophic was going on here. The dinosaur just didn't die and then got buried right where it died. It died someplace else and it was transported and got broken up by the time it was deposited at the location we see it. So, how does a fossil form? Can somebody tell me what the first requirement for a fossil to form is?
Water.
Nope.
A dead critter.
Well, yeah,
You're getting close there. Yeah, the thing must die. That's the first requirement. Okay? The living thing must die. All right? What's the second requirement?
Water.
I already made one.
That's number 3.
I'm not going any further.
What's the second requirement? Absolutely correct. Okay? The remains must be rapidly buried or else.
They get eaten up.
Yeah. they get eaten or decompose. All right? Fossilized remains don't last on the surface too long, a matter of weeks before they're all broken up or they're eaten by something else. And the remains, particularly shells, dissolve right back into the seawater. And so when they're living, they're constantly replacing what's being dissolved. And so they're going to replace more than what's being dissolved so that the shell grows. But when they die, they don't do that anymore. And so once it just lays there on the bottom of the seafloor, it's going to dissolve right back into the seawater. It has to be rapidly buried. So, what's the third requirement?
Water.
Okay, water's part of it. But what has to happen for the fossil to be turned to stone?
It's got
Mineralized water.
It's got to be mineralized water. So the remains must be turned to stone. Okay, so that's the requirements for a fossil. Guess what? We find actual bones out there of dinosaurs in the sediments. You know, up in Montana, the Helks Creek Formation, they've excavated actual dinosaur bones. The surface is mineralized, but the interior hasn't been mineralized. There's still soft tissue preserved. How does that stay preserved for over 200 million years? It doesn't. Okay, and they've not only found it. Mary Schweitzer found these dinosaur bones with soft tissue in them. And she was wondering, how did this get preserved? Okay, she was one of the first ones to discover it and publish it. It's now been done several times. You know, and they found mastodon bones, same thing, soft tissue preserved. All right, these are actual bones, they aren't fossils. All right, so very, very interesting. So, let's look at the Chimney Formation. And we've got two scientists here, and they're looking at the Chimney Formation. On the left, we've got a scientist with a biblical worldview. Okay, this scientist believes in a global flood, believes in the Bible, and God's word is truth. On the right side, we've got a secular scientist. He has a secular worldview. Okay? He doesn't necessarily believe in the Bible. May not necessarily believe in God. And so this scientist believes that everything took millions of years to happen, and man comes up with the ideas. Okay? Just by making some observations of things that happened in the past, they come to a conclusion that's not even based on the scientific method. And they come to it with what's just based in their minds. All right? The scientific biblical worldview is going to interpret these features by looking at them through the Bible. Use the Bible to interpret these features. You know one thing? They're both looking at the same evidence. And once again, their interpretation of that evidence is based on their worldview. These are a comparison of worldview interpretations for the Chimney Formation. So, when was the Chimney Formation deposited? Well, according to secular worldview, it was the late Triassic period, about 200 million years ago. What does the Bible say? You go through the genealogies and everything? You know, about 4,500 years ago. Noah's flood. Okay? I'm going to show you the Chimney Formation fits very well into the biblical worldview model. The deposition period. Okay, secular scientists tell us it was deposited over 13 million years. Okay, so you take a formation that's about 1,500 feet thick and deposit it over 13 million years. That's a very little amount being deposited every year. It's a very small fraction of an inch, okay? how do you form fossils, you know, when it, in that type of an environment, okay? You need the rapid deposition, but yet we find fossils. Well, that's totally against what the secular worldview says. According to the biblical worldview, the Chimney Formation, the full 1,500 feet, 800 to 1,500 feet, was probably deposited within 10 to 20 days. Depositional environment, well, the secular worldview say it's fluvial, which is river, okay? And that it was a floodplain type area, and that there were multiple floods that occurred during this time period. All right? But they can't accept there was one flood. According to the biblical worldview, 80 to 90 days into the flood. So, let's look at the secular worldview here and what the secular model theory says. Well, first off, what they believe is that the Chimney Formation, which they think was deposited during the Triassic period, once again about 200 million years ago, took 13 million years to deposit, you know, was right at the beginning of the age of the dinosaurs. And this is called the Geologic Column. Okay, and somebody tell me where the Geologic Column exists?
Textbooks.
Textbooks, absolutely correct. That's the only place where it's found, okay? You can look at the rocks in the Grand Canyon. That is not the Geologic Column. Those are geologic layers, all right? So, this is what they say. The Chimney Formation was deposited over 200 million years ago during the late Triassic period. And these colorful hills and the flat-top mesas and everything of the Painted Desert are primarily made up of Chimney Formation. And these are river-related deposits. And the Chimney Formation is further divided to include the Blue Mesa member, the Sansolea member, the Petrified Forest member, and the Ararat member. So what they believe is that during this 13 million year period, 13 million years, that's a lot of time, that this area where the Chimney Formation was deposited, now, according to plate tectonics, this area was someplace else on the planet. If you had a GPS at that point, you'd be elsewhere, okay? Not here in the great southwestern United States where we are now, okay? Because the plates were moving, all right? So, but what was going on at that time is that the whole area was kind of a floodplain. It was an alluvial plain, and it was composed of mud and sand and early mountains and some uplands, and so these rivers were flowing across there. It was a very wet time period, and there were a lot of trees that were growing, and you can see over here to the side, there were some volcanoes there, which would have probably provided some volcanic ash. And so you had all of these rivers, and occasionally these rivers would flood, and they would knock down the trees, and some creatures would get caught in these floods, and they would be rapidly buried and preserved. Well, you know, once again, I've got a real problem with that because this deposit is very, very extensive. It covers a large area, and you know, you find petrified wood all over the place. So this shows what was going on. So at the very bottom, you had these rivers that were flooding in there, knocking down the trees, burying them, and it was happening over a period of 13 million years. Once you get up to the top here, you've got primarily marine deposits, and you start seeing the fish. But one thing, this doesn't fit. It does not fit the model. The field evidence does not fit the model. What they're seeing out there doesn't fit their model. Because what we see out there shouldn't have occurred, allowing slow processes. Theory of Uniformitarianism. What we see there is evidence of rapid processes. It doesn't explain the extensive deposits of petrified wood and fossils. They're all over the place. You know, now if this was just a localized event, such as what happened in Mount St. Helens, okay? Yeah, that's possible. But, you know, what we actually see there require rapid deposition and burial and not deposition over 10+ million years. So, let's look at the Chimney Formation using a flood model and look at it from a biblical perspective. What happened in the flood? Well, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, all the fountains of the great deep burst open. Okay, this is day 1 of the flood. And the floodgates of the sky were opened. It was much more than just rain. You had volcanic activity, the earth bursting open, earthquakes, tsunamis, the most extreme geologic processes ever seen on the planet, before or since. Right? This was a very catastrophic event. Man was totally taken by surprise. Most popular scenario has a single landmass ripped open at mid-ocean ridge, ocean basins collapsed, mountains raised. Massive outflows caused tremendous material transport. Mountains rose later due to continental or plate compression. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, according to the Bible. And then the rain stopped. But yet, the waters kept rising on the planet. Fountains of the great deep kept on going for about 150 days. And then they finally stopped. I'm going to show you that the peak of the flood occurred at day 150. Existing mountains were covered by 20 feet of water. Okay? Those were the pre-flood mountains. They weren't very high. They definitely were not as high as what we see today. The whole topography of the planet was changed during the flood, during the 1-year period of the flood. If you were to take the entire topography of the planet, stretch it flat, the whole planet would be covered by 1.5 miles of water. All right? So we need to have the ocean basins and the continents to keep dry land. After 150 days, the water started to recede, and the ark eventually ran aground on the mountains of Ararat. This is not Mount Ararat in Turkey. Okay, a lot of people will lead you to believe that, but it is not. Mountains of Ararat are someplace else in that area. Okay, Mount Ararat is a post-flood volcano. Okay, it was a volcano that may have started erupting during the flood, but it continued erupting after the flood, and it's still an active volcano. After 8 months, the mountains became visible, and these are the new mountains. It took 4 more months for the floodwaters to dry up. Total of 1 year and 10 days on the ark, about 370 to 375 days. Then the door of the ark was opened, and Noah and the animals were able to walk out and view the changed landscape. It wasn't what they saw a year earlier. It was completely changed. So this is a simplified flood model. So it took 150 days for the flooding to occur. And at about 150 days, according to the Bible, the peak was reached. The entire planet was submerged. All living land-based life was dead. Okay? Except for what was the animals and the people that were on the ark. Sea animals, such as whales and things like that, survived the flood. Okay, because they lived in the water. They were stressed, but they made it through it. All right? But there were a lot of fossils that were formed of those marine creatures. So, after day 150, the floodwaters started flowing off, started with water in sheets, so sheet erosion, and then waters in channels started carving canyons. So this is a very simplified biblical flood model. This came from Tom Vail's book, Grand Canyon, A Different View. And you can see right here the flood rock. So the inundatory stage, where it's the flooding stage, and then the recessive stage. And then eventually you have post-flood rocks, and then down here you had some possible pre-flood rocks and creation week rocks. This shows kind of a simplified biblical geologic model, and this is based on the Grand Canyon, what we see in the Grand Canyon. Well, at the Grand Canyon, you know, once again, we've got like about, 3,000 feet of sedimentary rock here, and so there's about 12,000 feet that are missing above that. And so we get the Grand Staircase formed. Once again, about 15,000 feet of sedimentary rocks deposited on the Colorado Plateau. The average thickness of sedimentary rocks all over the earth is about a mile thick. So, once again, the secular geologist can't explain this, okay? Because those rocks shouldn't be that thick, and they should still not be that thick. They should have been eroded away and not be 15,000 feet thick. This is the Taz Walker model of how the flood occurred. And so once again, it took a total of 150 days for the floodwaters to reach their zenith or peak. And then afterwards, it started abating and receding. And it took about another 220 days for the floodwaters to flow off the land. Now, one of the problems is that anything that's above the Grand Canyon sequence is considered by some flood geologists to be the end of the flooding period. But if that was the case, that would put the Chimney Formation right there, after day 150. But yet, we find dinosaur footprints in the Chimney Formation. Everything was supposed to be dead at 150. So, what does that tell us? The Chimney Formation was deposited before that 150-day period limit. This was one question that I had, and it's a place called Westwater Canyon. It's east of Moab. It's on the Colorado Plateau, and it's on the Colorado River. A very, very interesting place. Have any of you done any rafting in Westwater Canyon? Terry has. I have. It's a fantastic area. It's a one-day raft trip, and if you never get to raft the Grand Canyon, this is like a mini Grand Canyon. You've got class 4 and 5 rapids in there, and it's a one-day trip, and it is a load of fun. Okay, and the nice thing about it, this area, the water temperature is about 75 to 80 degrees, unlike the Grand Canyon where it's 45 to 50 degrees, because it comes out of the base of Glen Canyon Dam. So, it's a really, really neat area, and I recommend that, if you're ever up in the Moab area, contact one of the outfitters, and they'll take you on a tour up to Westwater Canyon. It's just a very fantastic area. So, up there in the corner is about where Westwater Canyon is, and it kind of washed out there. But it's up there near the border with Colorado. Now, this was one thing. When I was on this trip, I told the guy I was a geologist, and he says, "You're gonna love this." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, you're gonna love this." And we came around the corner and started hitting into the canyon. And the canyon became very narrow at that point. He says, "What does that black rock up there look like to you?" I took a look at it and I go, "That's the Vishnu Shift." Vishnu Shift occurs at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Okay, it's recognized to be over 2 billion years old. We view it as creation week rock. Okay? And I'm looking at it going, Vishnu Shift? I thought it only outcropped in the Grand Canyon. He says, it outcrops in two places, here and in the Grand Canyon. And I'm going, wow, this is kind of neat. Then we got into the canyon, and guess what I find down there? I find the Chimney Formation sitting on top of the Vishnu Shift. Okay, that's called an unconformity. Okay, what's missing there? Well, a whole pile of sediment. Okay, not only is the Moenkopi Formation, which sits right below the Chimney Formation, but the whole Grand Canyon sequence is gone. All right, what happened here? Above that, you've got the Wingate Sandstone, which you typically find above the Chimney Formation. And then above that, you've got the Navajo Sandstone. So, what happened here? The entire Grand Canyon sequence is missing, which is 3,000 plus feet of sedimentary rock.
Who stole it?
Who stole it? What happened to it? It's gone. Well, once again, I'm going to go into this mega sequence record and show why it's gone. Okay. Once again, I think these dinosaur tracks kind of fit into what's happening here. All right? So, this is a picture of the dinosaur tracks that are up there near Tuba City. And the one thing that you see here, these dinosaur tracks aren't orderly. They're chaotic. Something bad is happening here. Okay? They're running around. They're scared. Okay? They're dropping their eggs. Dinosaurs usually deposit their eggs in a very orderly, circular fashion. They're deposited all over the place. They're dropping their doo-doo. Okay? What is going on here? Okay? Something really bad is happening. Something catastrophic. All right? So, let's look at the mega sequence depositional model. Okay? So, the sedimentary rocks that are found on the planet, and at least a mile thick on every continent, 15,000 feet thick on the Colorado Plateau, have been divided up, and this was done by the oil and gas industry probably about 50 plus years ago, and they divided it up into 6 mega sequences: the Sauk, the Tippecanoe, the Kaskaskia, the Absaroka, the Zuni, and the Tejas. And you can see, and if you read Tim Clary's book, Carved in Stone, each one of these sequences is marked by a rise in water level. So you can see here relative sea level, going to the left it's rising, going to the right it's falling. And you can see rise in sea level, drop, rise in sea level, drop, rise in sea level, drop, rise in sea level, then a drop. Right here, water level reaches its maximum? What does that tell us?
150.
150 days, okay? Then the water level starts receding, okay? They can look at these based on the sedimentary rocks because these sequences usually start with a gravel or a sandstone and then trend toward finer grained materials as you go up, which corresponds with rising water levels. Then it starts going back to coarser grained materials as the water level falls. Then you start getting another sequence of finer grained materials built up on top of that. So they can look at these, and they can also look at the patterns, the depositional patterns and everything, and be able to determine how fast the water was flowing, how deep it was, and come up with a very, very strong model for the deposition of these rock layers. So, based on Tim Clary and other scientists' research at ICR, day one started with the deposition of the sock. By day 40, you had the water level rising because of the rain and the breaking forth of the waters of the fountains of the Great Deep. Then the Absaroka was deposited. That took us top layers of the Grand Canyon and into what is now the Chimney Formation. By day 150, which was within the Zuni, you had maximum water level. Everything was flooded at that point.
We lost the microphone.
I lost the microphone?
Just can't hear it now.
It's blinking on your red light, on the light.
It's on.
It's blinking blue now,
There it is, it's solid now.
right now.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so by day 150, maximum water level. So let's look at each one of these mega sequences. So the blue, and I wish these were better. Tim Clary sent me these slides and they didn't get copied into PowerPoint very clearly. But the blue layer shows the thickness of the sock mega sequence. So it shows here that a lot of the planet was still not submerged while the sock was being deposited. We move into the Tippecanoe mega sequence. Once again, same thing. The Tippecanoe was being deposited where the blue is shown. That's the thickness, the thickest layers of the Tippecanoe. And you can see that here in the southwestern United States, we had Tippecanoe sediments being deposited. We find those at the Grand Canyon. Once again, the Kaskaskia, all right, still being deposited in most of the western United States. But we see that there's an opening here. What's going on here? Let's look at this a little bit closer. All right, I got it circled there. So, this is probably the Grand Canyon area right here. So the Kaskaskia megasequence is being deposited in the Grand Canyon area. But around this area, it's not being deposited. Those are the Grand Canyon sequences. What they call this from the secular standpoint is the Uncompahgre Uplift. During this time period, several million years ago, the mountains were pushed up and creating this uplift. And so what they believe is that the Grand Canyon sequence was pushed up, it was there, and it was eroded away. But according to the biblical worldview, this was the Uncompahgre highland. Okay? Grand Canyon sequence was not deposited in this area. And so this answered one of the big questions I had. What happened at Westwater Canyon? It was in the Uncompahgre highland. All right? And so Grand Canyon sequence was never deposited. Then along came the event that caused the Chimney Formation. And the Chimney Formation in this area was deposited right on top of the Vishnu Shift.
Okay, so this is all happening underwater?
This area here
I'm
at
trying
this,
to imagine what's going on. Is the whole Earth underwater right now?
no, not at this point, not until day 150. So this is before day 150.
It was at 30, 38, right?
Yeah, so this is,
So it's still raining.
it's still raining at this point, but the water hasn't completely covered the land.
But it's
So,
rising.
but it's rising. But there are areas of the earth where there's still dry land up until day 150.
Okay, so
And,
now,
and up until that point, okay, during this time period, there were animals that were congregating on these highlands, okay, and they were surviving. And it was man, mammals, dinosaurs. Animals were congregating on these highlands. And then eventually, by day 150, they were all submerged and all gone. Everything died.
As the water's rising, so then there's different kinds of, I guess, currents?
Yes.
Pressures and currents, so the land, the soil that's loose is moving around with those water currents? So
Yes.
things are getting pushed around.
Yeah, and they're being deposited in some places, but not on the highlands. They aren't deposited on the highlands until day 150.
Okay.
Okay? So once again, the entire Grand Canyon sequence is missing in this area. So let's look at again at the mega sequence deposition model. So let's go to the Absaroka. Okay, so the Absaroka mega sequence, once again, we're looking at this area again around the southwestern United States. And once again, we've got deposition occurring. And there's still a little bit of highland here that's not quite completely covered, okay? This is where the Chimney Formation comes in, and it eventually covers that area, and that's the area of Westwater Canyon. So, day 150, and this is about where the Chimney Formation would fall in, okay? You've reached a high water mark near the end of the Absaroka, and now the water level's starting to fall again. So now you've got these highlands that are still available, and you've got creatures that have congregated on these highlands. All right? What was happening here? My theory is that at this time, these creatures were on this highland, and all of a sudden, the water went out.
Tidal surge.
Tidal surge. Okay, so it's going out. Okay, you remember the Indonesian earthquake and tsunami?
Yeah.
Okay, the water went out, and that's what happens during tsunamis. It went out a long way. Well, what were people doing?
Yeah.
They decided to wander on out there and collect fish and pick up shells and stuff like that, not realizing that right behind it was this huge wave coming in. Okay? I think that's what happened here. Because these people, dinosaurs and stuff like that, all the water came out, hey, free meal. They've been hungry for a while. Okay, so they're going to go out there and they're going to collect any fish or anything like that, shellfish and stuff like that, without realizing that there's probably about 1,000-foot high tsunami coming their way. And then all of a sudden, they look to the horizon, and there's a huge wall of water flowing in.
But it's also still raining, right?
No, at this time, this is after day 40. Okay, so the rain stopped at day 40. Okay, so there's something happened in this time period that caused a large tsunami, a massive earthquake, volcanic eruption, maybe even something from outer space hitting the water. So something massive happened that caused a huge tsunami. The rain had stopped, all right? There were probably occasional rain showers during that time period, but the massive rainfall that caused the flood had stopped. So all of a sudden, all this water's coming. Everybody starts running, okay? And you see these chaotic patterns. And then all of a sudden, this water crashes over this highland. Everything is rapidly buried. And these footprints are preserved. The dinosaur fossils are preserved. And the thing is, dinosaurs, when they die, they sink. Mammals, we float, okay? So any mammals or humans that were present on this, they're floating on the surface, they're decomposing, the dinosaur fossils are preserved. All right?
Jim?
Yes?
Dennis Bockerboy, who was a creation geologist in Oregon, he believed at this point that all these dinosaur tracks were, they were at this high ground. As the water went, they saw another ground they thought might be higher, like next best place to go. And so there was probably a variety of reasons. Yeah, they were probably hungry too as well.
Yep.
He attributes a lot of these footprint areas, not just limited to the city, he would refer to some other ones, that they were probably looking at the next step in the ladder to try to escape. And unfortunately, they didn't know about tsunamis. So.
Yeah, and they didn't get very far because eventually the Morrison Formation is deposited much higher up in the sequence, and that's where we find most of our dinosaur fossils. The Zuni megasequence, once again, the Zuni is getting up to the maximum level. So this would be day 90 to day 160. So at day 150, the entire planet is covered by water. And the Tejas megasequence, day 160 to day 365. So that's the recessional sequence. I just kind of put this in here. It's in the book, but you know, there was about almost 2 kilometers of material deposited up through the Absaroka, but most of the sediment was deposited during the last 2 megasequences. Okay, so that would be during the recessive stages. Yes, ma'am.
So, okay, so they stopped reading at day 40, but the water reached its peak height at day 150. Right?
Day 150.
Where did the water come from for those 90 days?
The water was coming from the subsurface of the earth, from the fountains of the Great Deep. So the fountains of the Great Deep kept going up until day 150. So they stopped at day 150, and at day 150, the water level reached its peak. So let's kind of quickly look at the origin of the Chimney Formation sediments. Dr. Steve Austin, who used to be with the Institute for Creation Research, was looking at the Morrison Formation. I've mentioned the Morrison Formation, and it's a very, very similar formation to the Chimney Formation. It forms these badlands and these piles. Looks a little bit different color, but more browns and oranges and a lot of grays and purples, but it looks quite the same. But it contains primarily dinosaur fossils. Not a lot of petrified wood in the Morrison Formation. And he was able to do some studies on it, and he discovered that the Morrison Formation, which is shown here by the red, originated from a massive supervolcano in Southern California called the dike swarm. And these dikes, what there were huge fissures that were over 100 miles long that were just kicking out tons of material, about 4,000 cubic miles of material. And it formed what's known as the brushy basin member of the Chimney Formation, which has a lot of dinosaur fossils in it. So this would have been getting very, very close to day 150. And so it was the last stand of the dinosaurs. They had found this final high ground, and they got blown off that high ground, buried very, very rapidly, and deposited. Most of the dinosaur fossils found in the Morrison Formation are broken up. They aren't whole skeletons. So it tells us that they were being just tumbled together. So what about the origin of the Chimney Formation sediments? Well, if you've gone to the teepees, they tell you that these two white layers here are volcanic ash. But what are the entire formation, the entire 800 to 1,500 feet thick, may have originated from a supervolcano? That'd be very interesting because, you know, if it could be tied to a supervolcano that erupted more recently, that totally wipes out old ages. All right? Maybe it was Superstition Mountains. Okay, right here in Arizona. You go down the road here, you see the Superstition Mountains. How many of you realize that the Superstition Mountains are a supervolcano?
Because you told us.
As I told you a while ago. Okay? But the Superstition Mountains are a supervolcano. In fact, it's a larger volcano than Yellowstone. Right? The Superstition Mountains are made up of 3 calderas, large calderas that are adjacent to each other. The largest of these is the Superstition caldera, which is 26 miles across. If you go to the web page for Lost Dutchman State Park, they talk about some of the geology of the Superstition Mountains. They say that the Superstition Mountains are a supervolcano and erupted probably more than 2,300 cubic miles of material. That's a lot of material. Could that have formed the Chimney Formation? It's a research project, and one of these days, when I'm no longer practicing as a geologist, I might take it on. I'll need some help, but yeah, if you can prove that the Chimney Formation originated from the Superstition Mountains, which are thought to have erupted 7 million years ago, you just put a whole wrench in the whole old age theory.
I just wonder why the Salt River would decide to turn and go right into that.
Yeah, yeah, that's called the water gap. So, miles, yes,
2,300 cubic miles.
yep. So that's like 2,300 square miles.
Across the United States.
Yeah, that could be clear across the United States. But that would be like 2,300 square miles by a mile thick. Okay? But it's not that thick. It's only 1,500 feet thick.
It's like it's covering 2/3 of the United States.
Yep. And I showed that. Yeah,
That's a lot.
that's a lot. The Morrison Formation covers a lot more ground. Okay? But that was 4,000 cubic miles. So, what I believe, and this is the interpretation based off of, you know, what I'm seeing in the geologic record and what I'm seeing in the Bible, the Chimney Formation was deposited in a matter of days late in the Absaroka megasequence, 80 to 90 days after the start of the flood. So this would have probably been about 40 to 50 days after the rain stopped. All right? And as I said, it probably took 10 to 20 days for the Chimney Formation to be totally deposited. Okay? And it may have been less than that. Okay? But it was moving as a slurry in the water. I think it originated partly or entirely from a supervolcano eruption. Could have been the Superstition Mountains. It could have been another volcanic eruption in the area. But I believe it came entirely from, partly or entirely from a supervolcano eruption. And, you know, even the secular geologists believe that portions of the Chimney Formation came from a volcanic eruption. Sediment containing trees and remains of killed land-dwelling creatures moved as a slurry with the water flow. Okay, so this was a muddy slurry. And what had happened, similar to what we see at Mount St. Helens, there was probably a very, very large log mat that was floating on the surface of the water. And then all of this volcanic debris covered the entire area, rapidly burying this log mat and then sinking it to the bottom. Hence, most of the trees that we find in the Chimney Formation are horizontal. We don't find anything that's sitting vertical. Okay, that's kind of different from what you see at Yellowstone National Park, where a lot of them are sitting vertical. Okay, well, that's because they had their root balls at that time and they sank vertically and then were buried in a vertical position. But in this case, they were probably floating on the water, rapidly covered, and then sunk.
Well, Jim, if they were floating as a log mat and then you have one of these tsunami situations where the water just evaporates, could that have maybe snagged it on the land?
Yep.
So it was sitting on the ground. The next slurry just, it didn't have to like overwhelm it very much to bury it.
Absolutely.
Because you got to prevent it from floating back up again, so.
Right. It has to be buried to keep it from coming back up to the surface.
But if it was already on the ground and not floating or something.
That could have happened too.
Because I mean, because if we're looking at a tsunami effect for the dinosaur prints, maybe this ties into the same sort of process.
Mm-hmm. Presence of deep marine fish fossils such as the coelacanth indicate that there were marine conditions. Okay, once again. And tsunamis generated by seafloor changes washed onto the highlands, removing trees and killing land-dwelling creatures, resulting in a mix of petrified trees, marine fossils, and land-dwelling fossils. And so these dinosaur footprints provide a record of what happened. Okay, so let's complete the talk and let's look at Romans 1:20. We've been given these beautiful geologic features as evidence of God's judgment. Okay, what God did. They're beautiful today, but they're evidence of God's judgment for man's sin. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that we are without excuse. Okay? God left this stuff, these geologic features, as a message. I created this in judgment for man's sin. Okay? You got to look at these in a different way other than they're just beautiful things. They're evidence of God's judgment on a fallen world. Now, I know this is the Grand Canyon, but it's a neat verse and a neat view. And this came from Tom Vale's book, Grand Canyon Vale View, a different view. See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. Okay? Well, we're being taught by this is the traditions of men, the principles of the world. It's indoctrination. It doesn't talk about the Bible. Okay? What Paul is saying here, trust the Bible. It gives you all the answers. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions.
And the wicker basket is available to accept your generous free will On course.
Well, I'll start with basket, but I got a question for you.
Yes.
You went to what university for your bachelor's?
Northern Arizona University.
Okay. What was your view during those 4 years? Was it as a young Earth or an old Earth?
Well, I was a Christian at the time. I really didn't know much about young Earth or old Earth at that time. And so I didn't know about any of the consequences or anything like that. And so the consequences of what the age of the Earth meant. So I kind of felt that maybe the Earth was, millions and billions of years old. I never believed in evolution. Okay, so I may have been an old ager without really knowing it. I do know that one day I was talking to a geology student, or she was a student. She was taking a class in what is known as historical geology. And she was taking it as an elective, and the professor's talking about the evolution of shellfish. And so she's sitting there, and I turn around and I look at her and I go, you know what? I can't believe this. And she goes, why not? And I said, well, I'm a Christian. And she says, well, that's too bad. Back then, evolution wasn't, it was still kind of getting rolling, and it wasn't as big as it is today. And there was a professor up at NAU. His name is John DeCourt. He was a chemistry professor, and he was a Christian. And there was one day, I was involved in a group called Campus Ambassadors at the time, Conservative Baptist ministry. And we had a Christmas party at his house. And I asked Dr. DeCourt, and I said, I'm kind of struggling with this. I said, I'm hearing about this evolution and all this type of stuff. And I said, I don't believe it, but it's just very confusing for a Christian. And I said, you're a professor here, but you're a Christian. How do you handle that? And he said, Jim, let me tell you. He said, one day I was looking at a water molecule in a scanning electron microscope. And he said, and water molecules, simple. Hydrogen atom, 2 oxygen atoms. And he said, there was perfection to it. And he said, at that point, I just understood there was a creator. He said, that could not have happened by chance. And water was actually the first thing that was created by God. And he said, from that, I became a Christian. And he said, I believe that God created the heavens and the earth according to the Bible. I said, wow, that's neat. And, I didn't, I kind of took a lot of weight with that. It was several years later. I was speaking at Palmcroft Baptist Church, where I met Michael, and I was speaking to Jim Futch's class, and I was giving a talk on something. I might have been talking about the Grand Canyon or something. And there was a gentleman in the audience. It was Dr. DeCourt. And I was able to tell him how much I appreciated what he said to me. And, and actually, I didn't as I said, I kind of didn't know the consequences to what the old Earth, young Earth debate was. But we went to my wife read this article that Ken Ham was speaking in Phoenix. This was in 1993. And he was going to be talking about creation, the flood, evolution, those types of things. And I really didn't want to go, but she convinced me I needed to go. So I went, and I'm listening to, and there was another reason I decided to go. Gary Parker, who was with IC, or with AIG at the time, was also speaking at the seminar. And I knew of Gary Parker. I went on a trip with the Institute for Creation Research in 1987 up to the Grand Canyon. Spent 5 days in the Grand Canyon with Steve Arston, Larry Vardaman, and John Morris. And we were looking at evidence of the flood. And I still wasn't convinced on the age of the Earth, and I didn't think it really mattered if the Earth was old or young. Well, so I wanted to see Gary and just talk to him and tell him I was on that trip. And so I'm listening to Ken Ham, and he says, so, you got the fossil record out there, all right? And he says, you know, look at these things. There's billions of dead things laid down all over the Earth, buried by water. And, you know, laid down by sediments that originate from water. And he says, you know, things like dinosaurs and things like that, they say that these creatures died millions of years before man even came into being, even walked on the Earth. And Ken said, well, if these creatures died millions of years before man, well, what does the Bible say? Well, the Bible says the wages of sin is death. And that the curse was placed on all creation, the curse of death. So if these creatures died millions of years before man even walked on the planet, there was death before sin. Okay? Once again, that was the curse, was death. Well, if there's death before sin, well, there's no penalty for man's sin. There's no penalty for man's sin. Christ didn't have to die on the cross. If Christ didn't have to die on the cross, we have no hope. And Ken mentioned that, and he mentioned it clearly. I turned to my wife, Terry, she's over there, and I said, did I hear what I think I just heard? And she goes, yeah. And I said, wow, totally changed my life. And I realized at that point, the Earth had to be about, you know, less than 7,000 years old according to the Bible.
Now, your professors in the classroom in no way indicated anything other than the created tree and all those ages and what have you. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Now, I did have a professor at NAU. His name was Larry Agenbrod. And I found out he was a Christian. He actually attended the church I attended there in Flagstaff. And his one of his grandchildren was being dedicated, and he was there. And his son was there. And I'm going, what's a geology professor doing here at a church? And several years later, there's a gentleman named Tom Olson. He runs a program called Geology for Kids. And he was a geology student at NAU also. He never graduated because he suffered a brain injury and was never able to complete his program. He did complete a program in education. But he became an amateur paleontologist and stuff like that. And earlier this year, he told me, did you know Larry Agenbrod was a young Earth creationist? And I said, I'd heard rumors to that effect, but I wasn't absolutely sure. So I did have at least one geology professor. There may have been another one, Gus Kotera, who was the chairman of the geology department when I started. A lot of people told me he was a Christian. So there were a couple there, and there were a lot of professors at NAU that were very strong Christians. Richard Beale,
He was a biologist, entomologist, and his father founded the Conservative Baptist movement in Arizona. So yeah, so there were several Christian professors up there. Any other questions I can take really quick? Yes.
It's just an observation that when you mentioned Badlands, it reminded me of the Badlands in South Dakota. And of course, the worldwide flood would maybe expect to see the Chimney type formations all around the world. And there, what is your tie into South Dakota as well as are there other places in the world where you see the same?
Well, yeah. Well, once again, the Morrison Formation. I think the Badlands in South Dakota are a part of the Morrison Formation. So that's a little bit higher up in the sequence. But the Petrified Sandstone, which is right at the first layer of the Sauk megasequence, it's the first layer in the Grand Canyon. If you go down the road here, it's that way, to the East Fork of the Verde River, right there at 87, right there next to the bridge, the Petrified Sandstone outcrops there. That's the first layer of the Grand Canyon. And that layer is found on every continent on the planet. So very extensive formations. What's known as the Coconino Sandstone, it's the white layer near the top of the Grand Canyon. It's found all over the continental United States under different names. In some places it's called the Deshay Sandstone. In other places it's called the Dakota Sandstone. In other places it's called the St. Petersburg Sandstone. But they're all the same level within the sequence. Okay, I've got to get going.
Tuesday, October 25th, 4 weeks from tonight. You know the location. Aliens, UFOs in the Bible. We haven't had this taught up here in Payson probably since we've been doing this, and we're in our 10th year now. So my wife said, I think it's time we had the alien talk up here. Okay, let's do it. So we're doing it.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Have you done any work with Arizona